Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Adams Brothers Podcast. We are here this evening with Miss Maya Espanet. Espanet, I believe I pronounced that right, Espanet. And we're going to be talking about medical marijuana today. And welcome to the show, Maya.
Thank
Maya.
you.
Maya.
Thank you.
Maya.
Thanks,
gonna get it
guys,
right.
for having me. I appreciate it.
Right.
Thank you.
So, Maya, tell us a little bit about medical marijuana. Whatever you know about it, just tell us about it. And if you're involved in the field, or are you trying to get in the field of medical marijuana? I know I ran into you at a local restaurant here about a year ago, and we briefly talked about it and some things. So whatever you'd like to share with us, go ahead. I mean, I just love to hear from you.
Absolutely. So medical marijuana it's exactly that. It's marijuana or cannabis used for medicinal purposes, which is something that it's honestly always been used for until it was made an illegal drug here in the United States. But prior to that, it was always used here in the United States as a pharmaceutical.
Right.
It is legal in the state of Florida medically. And many other states, I think most of the states, probably, I believe I'm not totally sure on this, but I believe at least 42 states are legal in some respect, whether it be recreational and medical or recreationally as well. I mean, recreationally or medically. Florida is a medical state. I became involved in the industry. It was either in 2000, I think it was 2016 when it actually became medical here in Florida. It was passed. I am a patient as well. I started out just delivering. So when you saw me, I was working for the company Grow Healthy. We didn't have any dispensaries at the time, so I delivered all over the state of Florida, and I would also educate patients on medical cannabis use.
Okay. So Growth Healthy, if I remember correctly, there is one here locally here in Broward County. Am I correct?
Yes. So Grow Healthy is just one of many other dispensaries. Well, I'd say medical marijuana companies here in the state of Florida. It's just one of, I'd say, probably 12 to 13 others, and it's growing. The problem, well, I wouldn't say, well, to me, it is a problem, is that Florida is one of those states that's set up, it's called vertical integration. So basically, it makes it difficult for your average Joe, especially brown and black people, to get into that industry. Well, I'm going to say get into that industry as owners. Vertical integration means from seed to sale. So what you'll notice about these companies, such as Grow Healthy, Suterra, MedMen, things like that, they are typically owned by an investment firm. Because they have to own everything from seed to sale, meaning that company has to be able to produce the seed, farm the seed, meet all of the legislation, ordinances, whatever there is, sell it, and everything in between. So if, let's say, a group of Black farmers in Belglade wanted to, which there's a large farming community out there, wanted to start farming cannabis, they would not be able to start their own farm. They would have to work for one of these companies because they own everything from the seed to the sale, and that's here. So that's something that I personally would like to see changed here, where it is horizontal integration, meaning that across the board, anybody can get into the cannabis. I mean, because they call it the green rush or whatever. So anybody can get into that field, whether they get in as a farmer, as a cook, because they want to sell edibles. If they just want to open a dispensary just for the sale of marijuana, they could do so. But as of now, how it's set up is to own a cannabis company in the state of Florida. I mean, medical cannabis. It's vertically integrated. So you have to pay a $60,000 application fee that at one time it was non-refundable, and there was no guarantee that you would get accepted. They may deny your application and then your $60,000 is gone. Now that may have changed, but that's how it was before. And there were many lawsuits that people brought up against the state of Florida because they felt that was unconstitutional.
Oh, it is, yes.
So you had to have $60,000 that you were able to just give away, basically, because if they say no, then you lost that application fee.
Right.
So that's just one aspect. The money that would be needed to start a cannabis company in Florida, just that alone, like I said, $60,000 non-refundable for the application fee. And then you have to be able to set it up where you're able to do everything from seed to sell. So that eliminates a lot of people in general, but specifically minorities.
Absolutely.
So it's like a monopoly pretty much that certain companies might have on it, basically what you're saying, a monopoly that they have.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you not only have the matter of the state, but you also have the matter of the cities or townships. For instance, Daryl, where I saw you at Buffalo Wild Wings in Deerfield, Deerfield will only allow a certain amount of dispensaries. So from what I understand, there are no more dispensaries that will be in Deerfield. So not only do you have to deal with the state, you also have to deal with towns and cities to see if they'll even let you have a dispensary in that place. So that's one thing that makes vertical integration. I think it automatically takes a large part of the population out of the equation to be able to enter that field.
And I can already see that it's going to be a lot of politics involved in this, because when you said that there are only so many marijuana shops that can open up here in Deerfield, that tells me right now that there's a lot of politics involved, and they only want certain people who may be some friends of theirs or buddies or whatever. And it's always like that, and the other people that look like us, black people, we want to get in there to that field. It's difficult. I mean, there's so much politics, and then you got to have the $60,000 just for an application. I mean, that's a lot of money, and there's a lot of profit into it, but still, I mean, they make it an uphill battle for you to get into that field.
They do, and but it all goes back to us getting out and voting in our local elections. Absolutely. Because that is what will turn that around. And especially now that it looks like, thank God, now that Biden and Kamala are in, and now that the Democrats hold a large portion in the Congress, that they may start changing these things where legislation will be changed, where eventually we will become a federally legal country. The other problem with cannabis, trying to get into that industry, if you're not just getting into hemp, which hemp is also marijuana, cannabis, but it doesn't have the different properties that would say that would help you to medicate or even recreationally. You're not gonna get high if you smoke hemp. But hemp is legal now, where anybody can start a hemp farm. And there's a lot of money to be made in hemp. But if you want to go specifically into the usage of marijuana for recreational medical purposes, there is a major uphill battle that is happening. And, you know, the other thing about that is, and I think this is a thing that everybody knows, is Blacks have been arrested and jailed on 4 times. We are 4 times more likely to get arrested and jailed for marijuana than whites. When you walk into a dispensary, and I heard somebody say this is not my quote, but when you walk into a dispensary and it looks like an Apple store, but there are still Black and brown people, or people in general, that are still in jail because of this, it's a problem. You have people that are making a lot of money on cannabis legally, but then there's still people that are rotting away in jail.
Right.
It's a problem there. It really is. And we are seeing more of a presence, especially as it's growing. There are pages on Instagram and on social media, minority cannabis pages. There are a lot of organizations that you can get into. There's Cannabis Lab, things of that nature, where you can kind of get an idea of happenings or going on in the industry, I'd say.
Now, my next question is, who qualifies for a medical marijuana card, and what can cannabis be used for?
Okay, so there are a specific set of conditions that, if you go on the state of Florida's website for medical marijuana, that, you know, such as Parkinson's disease, cancer, epilepsy, things of that nature. However, there are conditions that fall under that. So if you find a medical marijuana doctor, which they're all over, and I can actually, if at some point you need, I can give you some recommendations, because that is a business in itself, right? But if you find a medical marijuana doctor, and say, like, for instance, for me, I deal with chronic pain, chronic neck, chronic back pain. I think any of us that have sat in front of a computer for a job for years probably deal with that. If you deal with anxiety or depression, which is very prevalent, especially today with everything going on, that qualifies. COPD, really, there's not, as long as you are not even as an adult. I mean, I know there are organizations, moms for medical marijuana, and that's because they've seen how it has helped children with epilepsy completely, children that had no functioning life because they would have seizure after seizure after seizure, completely stop their seizures. Which, and I'm gonna go back to the medical part, because that was a big part of why I became so interested in the medical cannabis industry. I've always been a marijuana smoker on and off. Marijuana smoking is not the best way to medicate, let me just say that, but I've always been a smoker. As I learned more about the medical benefits of it, I have changed my I'd say route or way that I use, because I do use it now both medically as well as recreationally. And I'm proud of it, and I really want to see that stigma of weed or cannabis, or, you know, I'd like to see it change, especially in our community, because if you see the number of white, elderly, senior citizens that use cannabis for medication from all walks of life, you would be surprised. But because a lot of us have learned to be ashamed or to hide it, or we don't want our kids to know, we don't want our parents to know, this and that. And that's because of what we've been taught. We were taught that it's a drug, say no to drugs, when actually it's a plant that has been used to medicate for eons, you know, but that wasn't taught to us. When it was being used to medicate in the United States, when you could go into your local pharmacy to buy it, it was fine. When Black jazz players and Mexican farmers came and were using it recreationally, then it became a Schedule I drug up there with heroin, when that was never the case. Nixon was one of the first presidents before Reagan to push the war on drugs. Nixon specifically targeted marijuana because he knew that that was a way to criminalize Blacks and people that were the hippies, I guess, that were objecting or protesting against the war. And that's exactly what it did. But unfortunately, nowadays, when we do talk to people about cannabis use as medicine, especially a lot of the older generation, they want no parts of it. But will ask their grandchild to go get them a Coors Light or a Heineken out of the refrigerator. You know? Right. So, you know, that's a huge problem. There have been people who have been prohibitionists in regards to cannabis. There's a Judge Bench, that's his name, here in Florida. He's no longer a judge, but he was a judge. This man cured his COPD, which they say COPD is uncurable, but they have found that cannabis will heal the scar tissue in the lungs. They've also found that we have an endocannabinoid system, just like we have a pulmonary system, a respiratory system. We have an endocannabinoid system, and there are cannabinoids like THC, which, you know, when we smoke marijuana and when we get high, that's the THC, like CBD, which a lot of people don't realize is very medicinal and it will not get you high. You still need a license to get medical CBD. However, there are so many ways to medicate, and there are so many benefits, and these different cannabinoids, they interact with that endocannabinoid system, which is obviously how our bodies were made. It was made to interact with this plant, not with opioids for pain and all these other things that are not natural, that have all kinds of side effects, but we don't know this. And until we start getting out there and educating and becoming open-minded to these things, then we're still going to kind of be in the background and kind of coming up late when it comes to this industry.
Right. I got a question for you too, Mike. Mm-hmm. In the state of Florida here, if you have a medical marijuana card, can you still own a firearm? Because I know when you fill out that firearm form, it says on there specifically, if you use drugs, you will be denied a firearm.
And that's the thing. In the state of Florida, you can have a concealed carry permit as well as a medical marijuana card. The gray area comes into that firearm form because that's federal, and cannabis is still federally illegal. So that's when you get into a problem of buying a gun when you have a medical marijuana license. But yes, you can have a concealed carry, and that's another issue. That's something that is bizarre. It you know, you can buy a firearm and you can go into and get whatever, you know what I mean? But you can't buy a firearm if you're an actual patient. I think those things are going to change. You know, with Biden and Harris now, they are introducing legislation. Hopefully, that's going to decriminalize marijuana, and hopefully, eventually, it will be federally legal. In Florida, they're introducing legislation that they're hoping will stop Floridian or Florida employers from testing for marijuana. You know, we're patients, but there's some of us can lose our jobs, you know, as a result of it. So it's moving in that direction, but you know, it's moving in that direction without a lot of our faces to actually be a mouthpiece to get that information out there. And so the benefit of this whole cannabis boom isn't necessarily benefiting us unless we're Wiz Khalifa or Snoop or, you know, Jay-Z, somebody that has the money to open their own cannabis company.
And I want to talk, I'm glad you mentioned that because I had a question for that. Jay-Z, I read an article, but I didn't read the full article, but I kind of just glimpsed over it. I think it was saying something about Jay-Z has put like $10 million, I believe, in a fund for people of color, Black people. I like to use Black people specifically for a fund to open marijuana dispensaries. Did you hear of that? Because I just saw that, I think, about 3 or 4 days ago.
I just read that too. And I don't know a lot about it, but I did. I just saw that. And that's good. And that's another way that we're seeing that it is growing. That we are able, and we also got Jay-Z isn't here, so I don't know how that's gonna affect us. I know here in Florida, opportunities for us would be if you want to go into you know, into a corporate setting, you can always go and work for one of these companies. I also watched a young lady who was into the cannabis industry in Alaska. And she's a Black woman, and she talked about with this boom, there's all kinds of ways that we can, if we get creative. There are cannabis nurses, there are cannabis lawyers. Actually, the first time that I even got into the whole thought of cannabis industry, I went to like a meet and greet. And there was an attorney, she's a Black attorney here in Florida. She knew that was coming down the pipe, that we were soon going to be voting for medical marijuana just prior to 2016. And she went to the partners in her firm and said, hey, you know, since this is a thing, why don't I start doing cannabis law? I will do the research and everything. And that woman travels and talks at many conferences and things now. But she kind of, and I kind of got off track on where I was going with that. But I got off track from where I was going.
Well, you were talking about Black ownership, Blacks.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, yes, that's right. Black ownership. So that was the thing. Like, she was saying she got into cannabis law. There are people that can go into cannabis insurance. If there's an industry, there's a way to branch out and specifically like narrow in on that one thing. Cannabis law, cannabis insurance. Banks don't want to deal with cannabis companies. And, you know, like Killer Mike, they just opened that Black-owned bank. And if you look, there are a few more banks that are kind of going in that direction. I believe TD is one, and that might be because it's Canadian owned and Canada is a legal country. But there are ways to, like, if you want to enter that, if you want to enter a specific niche, cannabis consulting. I was looking at like the top 10 Black people in the cannabis industry overall. And, you know, I see a couple of them are into that whole consulting. So we, you know, there are states where we can't necessarily own farms yet or grow our own yet or actually like deal with the plant. But if we get creative, we can go into other areas and start our own companies. Like I started a company with my partner, Sorry We're Stoned, where we are going to do apparel. We're doing, you know, pipes, rolling papers, grinders, things like that. Things that you might want to use cannabis. So, you know, we just kind of have to get creative, especially in the state. We got to get more involved, I think, as far as making them give us these opportunities.
And that leads me to a question too, when you said earlier about Deerfield. Because I'm always looking at the, you know, the schedule for the commission here, and you know, around the county, I look. I'm like a political watchdog, and I was reading on the agenda, and I saw that when Deerfield was voting on that agenda about the medical marijuana, and they were limiting the number of dispensaries, I got right on the phone and I called our commissioner that represents this area. I should have called the mayor that day, you know, but I called my commissioner and I told him I was very concerned about that. And he agreed with me. I told him, I said, you know, they're limiting the people. And I told him specifically that you're only going to get, you know, political donors that, you know, gave to their campaign, and Black people are going to get shut out. And he was very concerned about it. And, but they, just like you said, they voted on it. But I knew they were going to do that. They was going to try to get in there, monopolize it with their own little buddies. Because I know how the politics work here in Deerfield. And and just like I said, that's what happened. And, you know, but I did call the commissioner and I voiced my concerns to him about the limitation on how many dispensaries would be allowed here. And you know, I knew it was going to go that route. You know, I already know they already going to talk behind the scenes somewhere with the manager, and they were going to come up with that. But I got one final question for you too. What do you think the chances are for the recreational marijuana passing here in Florida? Because I've been keeping up on it, trust me. And it's one senator, his name is Jeff Brands. And he's up in Central Florida. He's around that Central Florida area. And he's, you know, he's a Republican, but he's been very instrumental in reform for the justice system, criminal reform, and he's also been instrumental in putting the recreational marijuana on the agenda. But he came out with something today that overthrew everything, and that was like trying to limit if you've been convicted of a felony, like you're not entitled, or if you've been convicted, or you're in prison, or working from prison, or more, that you're not entitled to the $15 an hour minimum wage that we all voted for in November.
Exactly. And they're doing that also, that with the felons in I think Colorado might be the only state that has made it where if you were a convicted felon, you can still own a farm. You can still get into that industry, because a lot of the people that are in jail because of it. You know what I mean? So it's like it doesn't add up. And in regards to Florida becoming recreational, I think Florida is going to become recreational because it's a money industry, and it's a money industry. If it was essential during the lockdown, along with liquor stores, I think it's going to eventually be recreational. You know, we got to remember there was a time where alcohol was prohibited. We went through a prohibition with alcohol. So I believe that there will be a time where it will be recreational in Florida and probably throughout the United States. But where we come in is when it gets to that point, where will we fit in? Where would we have gotten in? On the tail end, or you know what I mean? And I think that's one of the big things, especially that we're talking about here, is you know, it's our community that has suffered the most from marijuana legalities and being locked up. And you know, there are people that are locked up for a long time who had small amounts of weed.
That's right.
And, you know, I do think that we're going in that direction where we're eventually going to be recreational state as well as nationwide. But the sad part to me is when it is to that point where you can go into, you know, your Walgreens or wherever and get marijuana. Where are we going to be in that? Will we have missed out on that whole green rush, or, you know, is there going to be a way for us to get in on it without moving out of Florida?
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of us sleeping right now on it. You know, I looked into it with some friends about doing it, but it always comes down to the money.
All of us, yeah, a lot of us are asleep on it, and a lot of us have to be a lot more open-minded about it. You know, my mom she was an educator here in Palm Beach County for over 30 years. She started tutorial program, you know, very involved in her church. My mom's 90 and she has arthritis throughout her entire body. And she went through pain management, everything. Finally, they dismissed her from pain management. And I had been talking to my mom. I talk to the people in her church. I get crazy looks, but I'm talking to them about it because I've talked to people. I've seen people that it's helped. I finally, once they dismissed my mom was just like, okay, you know what? I don't care. Yeah. So I took her, took her to a doctor. She got a license. And because I knew about it, I knew what to like help her with. So, you know, I made sure she was taking tinctures, you know, drops under the tongue, because, you know, she's not going to want to smoke and things like that. My mom said, had I known that it would take my pain away, I would have been growing it. I said, you would have been going to jail. But and she's not embarrassed to talk about it either. You know, now she let her license expire, and I take care of her. She's dementia in the later stages, but you know, it's just getting out there and I learning about it and knowing that it's not a bad thing. It's not addictive. It is a plan. We don't have to roll up a blunt and smoke it. We don't have to get high. We really can use it medicinally, and it has amazing benefits.
Yeah. No
Especially
doubt.
for the cancer patients. You know, there's a lot of cancer patients out there that the chemo just tears them apart. And I know personally some people that you know, that use the medical marijuana, and it helps them tremendously.
Yes.
And they can function. They have an appetite.
Yep.
Whereas when they're taking the chemo, they don't have that. So, and I was trying to explain that to a family member here just recently, and the family member laughed about it. I said, well, you laugh, but you know, until it hits close to home, then you wouldn't laugh about it, you know. So this is what this is all about, education. You know, we're trying to educate people, especially the older generation, like you said, you know, like our parents, and my dad is up to date on all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, but we're trying to educate people, and which is why we wanted to have you come on here and tell us, because I know you knew a lot more about it than us. So we really appreciate you, Maya, coming on here and telling us and sharing, giving us some insight on medical marijuana, and hopefully, they can pass some legislation where Black people can get in on this and stop making it so hard for us to get in on it, and to own these companies and grow it, and do the things that we need to do. We want our share of the pie too.
Absolutely. Right. And as we should be able to have it. Right. But guys, I appreciate it. This was fun.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor Espanet. She came on to the Adams Brothers podcast. If you ever get that company growing and off the ground, you're always welcome to come back here on this podcast and talk to us.
We're getting stuff in every day, and it's coming. It's coming.
I follow you all the time. I like your videos, and I show them to my brother, and I'm always following you. And keep doing what you're doing. Education is knowledge, so that's what we're here for.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Mayor Espanet, thank you so much for stopping by the Adams Brothers podcast, and have a wonderful evening.
You too. All right, guys. Take it easy.
You too.
Thank you.